I never expected that a casual movie night could shatter my assumptions about who I really was beneath the daily routine. Yet, standing in the living room with my laptop paused on the opening credits, my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break free. My roommate, Ian, wasn't even supposed to be home that evening, but his unexpected arrival turned everything upside down in a way I still struggle to put into words. I had been living in a modest two-bedroom apartment downtown, juggling part-time classes at a local college with a job at a small bookstore, which barely covered my half of the rent. My girlfriend and I had officially broken up 1 week prior, leaving me numb and disoriented, unsure how to push through each day when the simplest tasks felt monumental. The apartment I once loved for its cheap rent and decent location took on a suffocating air, because every corner reminded me of the dreams I had shared with someone who was now gone. Ian, my roommate, was the only steady presence in a life that had lost its usual shape, yet I rarely let him see my vulnerable side, afraid of unleashing an emotional storm when he was already working late hours at a nearby tech startup. Before the breakup, Ian and I had coexisted in perfect roommate harmony. He had his schedule, I had mine, and we'd occasionally meet in the kitchen at odd hours to share pizza or jokes about the ever-leaking faucet that never seemed to get fixed. Neither of us questioned how comfortable we were around each other, but we also rarely talked about our personal lives in detail. However, all of that changed after my girlfriend walked out, slamming the door behind her words of finality. Ian noticed my slump, saw how I barely ate for days, and quietly began leaving small notes of encouragement on the fridge, little half-jokes and motivational quotes that urged me to keep going even if it felt impossible. The night everything turned on its head, I had just managed to haul a bag of groceries into the kitchen, planning to distract myself with a silly comedy streaming online. I wanted to fill the silence, to keep myself from staring at the blank walls that now felt too big, too empty, for just one person's pain. My eyes stung as I sorted produce into the fridge, still replaying the breakup in my mind. Her final glance, that bitter note in her voice when she said she had fallen out of love. I shook the thought away, determined to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but the ghost of her presence haunted every step I took. Ian burst through the front door earlier than expected, a quizzical expression on his face, like he was weighing whether to ask how I was coping or to pretend everything was fine. His hair was damp from the light rain outside, and he offered me a half-smile, remarking that the city traffic had mercifully been light for once. When I told him I was planning to stream a movie, he brightened instantly, as though the invitation was exactly what he needed after a tough day at work. It was so normal, so ordinary, that I almost forgot how fractured I felt inside. We settled onto the lumpy couch, a hand-me-down from some friend of a friend, and I loaded the movie on my laptop. The flickering screen cast faint shadows across the walls, and my chest felt strangely tight, like an anxiety I couldn't name kept tangling itself around my heart. Ian seemed at ease, reaching over to grab a bag of chips he'd tossed on the coffee table, occasionally nudging my knee with his when he made an offhand joke. We had done this 100 times, but that evening, a strange sense of closeness began to form in the space between us, like the air was crackling with a static tension that neither of us understood yet. Halfway into the movie, I noticed Ian glancing my way more often, like he was concerned about whether I was genuinely enjoying the show or simply putting on a brave face. At some point, he asked if I wanted to talk about the breakup, his voice quieter than usual, careful not to pry. My immediate response was to clamp up, swallowing a dull ache that felt lodged in my throat, but I managed a half-hearted shrug before mumbling that I didn't think I was ready. Ian didn't press further, just nodded and placed a supportive hand on my shoulder, his touch lingering for a moment that felt both comforting and strangely disarming. That simple gesture cut through my defenses more effectively than I could have imagined. My body tensed at first, wanting to pull away, but something about the warmth in Ian's eyes made me stay. I felt my breath catch, and an unexpected flutter of awareness coursed through me, reminding me that the lines I used to draw in my mind about who I was attracted to might not be as solid as I thought. The thought faded quickly, though, replaced by a wave of gratitude for a roommate who cared enough to check on me when I was at my lowest. Sensing my emotional overload, Ian suggested we pause the movie and chat, offering a safe space for me to vent, if that was what I needed. My instinct was to reject the offer, to keep everything bottled up where it felt safer. But the sincerity in his voice disarmed me. I found myself talking about the breakup in brief, halting sentences, telling him how lost I felt, how each day seemed like a new challenge to get out of bed, and how I'd started questioning everything I believed about love. Ian listened, nodding quietly at all the right moments, occasionally offering a word or two of reassurance. I confessed that I felt weaker than ever, like a leaf caught in a storm, and he gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze, letting me lean into his solidarity. By the time the credits rolled on the laptop's idle screen, we had hardly touched our snacks, and my eyes had grown puffy from a few tears I had unsuccessfully fought back. Usually, I'd have been mortified to cry in front of someone else, but Ian didn't seem fazed. He told me that breakups could shake our entire sense of self and that sometimes the biggest surprises in life were the connections we formed afterward, in the midst of heartbreak. His words buzzed in my mind, echoing with a strange resonance that made me wonder if we were still talking about just a simple friendship. Yet, I brushed the idea away, tucking it into a corner of my heart I wasn't ready to explore. Despite my uncertainties, I felt lighter, more stable, as though I'd found the first step on a path leading me away from the wreckage of my old relationship. I woke up feeling uneasy, the apartment awash in pale morning light that contrasted with my restless thoughts about Ian and our late-night conversation. Despite barely speaking about my breakup, I had opened up more than usual, and I sensed a new closeness lurking beneath the familiarity of our daily routines. Over coffee, Ian offered a gentle smile that revealed he remembered every word I had confessed, though neither of us dared to bring up the lingering tension from the night before. Each passing hour, the echo of his touch on my shoulder haunted me, reminding me that my feelings had begun shifting in ways I couldn't quite control. My bookstore shift dragged on, and even busy work couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to Ian's quiet empathy, or the strange relief I felt whenever I thought of him waiting at home. When I finally returned, the living room was alive with the hum of a video game, and Ian paused it the instant he spotted me, his gaze soft with concern. He asked if I wanted to talk more about my breakup, and despite my first instinct to brush it off, I let him see how raw my emotions were as I fumbled through details of the life I'd planned with someone who left without warning. Ian responded by gently placing his hand over mine, sending a ripple of warmth through my chest that blurred the boundary between relief and attraction. Sensing I needed a distraction, he suggested ordering pizza and watching a mindless movie, something to keep us both from overthinking. Yet, as we sat on the couch with plates balanced precariously on our knees, the tension only deepened, every shared glance charged with unspoken questions. I tried focusing on the action scenes blasting through the speakers, but my attention kept drifting to the faint brush of Ian's arm against mine, and the cautious way he searched my face for hidden pain. After clearing our plates, we exchanged a few awkward jokes, neither of us willing to address the sudden weight of possibility hanging in the air. In the end, we settled into a half-embrace on the worn cushions, the movie's final explosions fading into irrelevance as I noticed Ian's breathing match my own. I realized that what I'd once viewed as simple roommate companionship was shifting into something that felt more intimate, even if neither of us could yet admit it. Though no dramatic words were spoken, I knew the tension we danced around would soon force a reckoning that might change our lives in ways I couldn't have predicted when I first found myself alone. The next few days passed in a haze of half-spoken confessions and gentle attempts at maintaining our old routines, but the underlying tension only grew stronger with every moment we spent together. I struggled to focus at work, replaying brief flashes of Ian's supportive touch or the way his eyes searched mine whenever we settled into the couch after dinner, both of us pretending nothing had changed. One evening, the power went out during a thunderstorm, and the darkness in our small apartment felt strangely intimate, surrounding us with an electrified quiet that made every shared breath more obvious than ever before. We lit a few mismatched candles from the junk drawer, laughing at how ill-prepared we were, and as flickering shadows danced across Ian's face, I realized he was watching me with a new kind of intensity that sent my pulse racing. I tried to distract myself by rambling about the bookstore's regular customers, but my words felt hollow, especially when Ian placed a hand on my knee, squeezing just enough to remind me I wasn't fooling either of us. My heart thudded in my chest as I finally admitted I didn't know how to handle the strange combination of gratitude and attraction I had been feeling ever since my breakup. Ian shifted closer, letting his fingertips trace comforting circles on my shoulder, and for a moment, we simply breathed, letting the rain hammer against the windows in a steady rhythm that echoed the pounding in my ears. When he quietly said my name, his voice gentle yet charged with an intensity one couldn't ignore, I felt my throat tighten in response. Without overthinking, I leaned in, feeling a swirl of emotions I had never experienced so powerfully before, and the warmth of Ian's lips meeting mine felt like an answer to all the questions I had been too afraid to ask. His hand cradled the side of my face, guiding me deeper into a kiss that started gently but soon turned into something more searching, our breaths mingling in a heady mix of relief and excitement. I realized then that the casual embraces and lingering glances we had shared until now were just the beginning, a prelude to something bigger neither of us had wanted to label too soon. We broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together, as Ian whispered that he had wanted to tell me how he felt for ages but never found the right moment. My mind reeled, struggling to reconcile the heartbreak I'd clung to with this sudden flood of longing for someone I'd once viewed solely as a supportive roommate. When I found my voice, I managed to say that I still felt uncertain, that I was terrified of rushing into a new relationship right after everything fell apart with my ex. Ian nodded, acknowledging my fears, and he brushed his thumb over my cheek, explaining that we could figure things out slowly, learning what intimacy and even sex might mean for us, without any pressure to define every step. The relief that washed over me was nearly overwhelming, igniting a desire to be near him that pulsed in every inch of my body. Yet I also sensed his tender patience, which acted as a gentle promise to move at whatever pace I could handle. We sat there for what felt like hours, sharing cautious kisses and letting our hands explore soft caresses beneath the candlelight, talking in hushed tones about the intimidating idea of giving ourselves permission to be more than just friends. Outside, the storm's thunder faded into a distant rumble, and I clung to Ian's warmth, feeling my insecurities loosen their grip on me, making space for a deep comfort I never imagined I'd find so soon after my breakup. Though we didn't define our bond with exact words, that night became a turning point, the moment our barrier of unspoken need finally crumbled and left us both trembling at the doorway to a new world. We eventually heard the power click back on, but neither of us moved to flip any switches, choosing instead to savor the dim glow of possibility and the realization that everything between us had forever changed. The morning after the storm felt strangely peaceful, and I woke up to find Ian quietly bustling around the kitchen, humming an off-key tune as if the night before had lifted a weight from both our shoulders. My cheeks still warmed at the memory of our candlelit kisses, the soft urgency of his hands along my arms, and the whispered confessions that neither of us had expected to share. I hesitated in the hallway, wondering if our fragile new closeness would vanish in the stark light of day. But when Ian noticed me, he offered a shy smile that chased away my worries. He set aside a plate of scrambled eggs, gesturing for me to join him at the table, where two mismatched mugs of steaming coffee waited like a cozy invitation. As we ate, we talked in cautious, halting sentences about what had shifted between us, neither wanting to push too far nor lose the tentative warmth that had blossomed. Ian insisted we focus on healing at my pace, reminding me that it was okay to feel anxious after coming out of a painful breakup. His understanding touched me in ways I couldn't fully articulate, stirring both gratitude and the stirrings of deeper affection. Each time our eyes met, a subtle current pulsed through me, and I felt the soft brush of his foot against mine under the table, an unspoken reminder that he was there, supporting me. Later that afternoon, we ventured out to restock groceries, navigating the store's crowded aisles with a new ease in our dynamic, sharing inside jokes that made me forget my lingering heartbreak. Ian never pried, never demanded a label for what we were becoming, but his gentle reassurances loosened the knot of fear twisting in my gut since my ex had left. By the time we returned home, the apartment felt more inviting than it had in weeks, as though the shadows of my past were finally receding. That evening, As we settled on the couch to watch the end of the movie we had missed in the storm's blackout, he tentatively slipped his arm around my shoulders, drawing me close without a word. I exhaled a shaky breath, letting my head rest against his chest, grateful for this small moment of security in an otherwise uncertain world. Although uncertainty still lurked in my mind, each soft caress across my shoulder and every lingering glance reminded me I wasn't navigating this alone. The tension that once felt suffocating had begun to dissolve, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe we could figure out what we meant to each other without rushing into decisions. Ian's presence was no longer just a comforting backdrop to my troubles. It was the promise of a new path, one that made me believe healing and closeness could coexist, even when doubts tried to slow me down. My nerves churned one late afternoon when Ian gently asked if I felt ready to explore what intimacy might look like for us, reminding me we could set any boundary I needed. A faint blush warmed my cheeks, yet I nodded, too tired of wrestling with doubts to deny my growing desire for his touch. We drifted into the softness of our living room couch, where his hand found its way beneath my shirt, palm resting against my skin in a gesture both tender and electrifying. My breath caught in my throat at the realization that, only a few weeks earlier, I had been reeling from a breakup, convinced I was done with trusting anyone, and yet here I was, leaning into a gentle closeness that felt startlingly right. Ian's kisses were slow and careful at first, each press of his lips prompting a fresh wave of reassurance that I wasn't alone in this new territory. I reciprocated by tracing the line of his jaw, my fingertips brimming with a curious boldness that left me shivering with anticipation. When he hinted that sex might be on the horizon, his words came softly, almost reverently, acknowledging that we weren't rushing into a full physical connection, but simply daring to believe it could be good for us one day. I admitted I wanted to take it in small steps, learning how to let go of heartbreak, how to navigate the spark between us, how to trust again despite old wounds. That evening, we lay wrapped in each other's arms, still clothed but dizzy with the possibility of moving forward. The flicker of lamplight danced against the walls, illuminating the gentle curve of Ian's smile each time I brushed my lips against his. Whispered confessions replaced the sound of our television, forming a bond that went deeper than casual dating or shared living arrangements. For the first time since my ex walked out, I sensed hope instead of fear, a conviction that I could rebuild myself with someone who truly saw me, flaws and all, and wanted to remain by my side. In the days that followed, I felt less haunted by the echoes of my past and more anchored by the quiet, growing bond Ian and I shared. The tension of what if this is a rebound slowly ebbed whenever he reassured me with gentle squeezes of my hand or by simply being there when I woke up from a restless sleep. At first, a stray pang of guilt would creep in whenever I thought about my old relationship, but Ian's presence reminded me I was no longer defined by loss. Instead, I had discovered a place of hope and attraction where I could let myself heal without hiding my vulnerabilities. One evening, over a simple home-cooked meal that Ian prepared, we found ourselves talking about the future in a way that felt surprisingly natural. He mentioned the idea of traveling once we both saved up some money, nothing extravagant, maybe just a weekend trip away from the city to relax and explore. I felt a rush of gratitude and excitement at the possibility of building new memories with someone who understood my fears but also encouraged me to dream again. His casual invitation to share this adventure with him sparked a feeling of trust that had been absent in my life for far too long. Later that night, we curled up on the couch with the television muted, focusing on each other's words rather than the flickering images. I admitted that I still struggled with waves of uncertainty, uncertain how to label this connection but clear that I wanted it to continue growing. Ian nodded, smiling in that earnest, patient way of his, letting me know he was just as invested in figuring it out one step at a time. We touched on sex, acknowledging we might take more strides someday soon, but for now, the tender warmth of shared closeness was enough to sustain us. As I drifted off against Ian's shoulder, lulled by the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, I felt an undeniable sense of peace settle over me. A peace that said it was okay not to have every question answered or every fear banished. What mattered was that we were committed to being present for each other, ready to embrace whatever came next. The guilt and regrets that once overshadowed my life began to fade in the soft glow of this new bond, leaving me hopeful about the path ahead. Though I knew life would bring its challenges, I also knew I wouldn't be facing them alone, and that single realization felt like the most precious form of healing I could have asked for.